Hello, all. I love the topic we're going to each discuss tonight, namely different forms of Jewish music and its impact on Jewish practice. I use the term practice versus prayer because it is more encompassing. Is reading or listening to the Torah reading or listening to prayer? Is chanting and nigun prayer? Is Zionist music like Yerushalayim Shel Zahav prayer? Regardless, all are expressions of Jewish spirituality and meaning and practice, and underscore that music is an essential part of both creating and sustaining Jewish spirituality and identity. One of the first conversations I had with Lior during our pastoral care chavruta underscored how important this topic is. While we were discussing whether the emotions and feelings behind several Psalms were King David's, I was asserting that we don't even know whether David actually wrote the Tehillim we were discussing. Lior said something very profound, something like, whomever wrote the words of the Tehillim, it was David who put the poetry to music, and this is what has made them the foundational and universal prayers they are today. Perhaps the music made both the man and the Tehillim. My topic today is cantillation and laning. When I reflect on my Jewish journey that led me to enroll in the PRS Smicha program the summer of 2021, I truly believe that the first seed was when I agreed to be one of 4 weekly Torah readers at our startup conservative synagogue in Larchmont, New York. A group of us, including many leaders of our former congregation, had decided to follow our Argentine rabbi, Alfredo Borodowski, to form a new congregation. We were very fortunate that one of our founding members, Marty Tannenbaum, was truly a Baal Koreh of the Torah, and he led our little band of committed laners for more than 10 years, giving us weekly assignments, modeling for us both how to lane and how to be Gabaim for each other and how to lead the Torah service. Although we had fewer than 50 members in the 12 plus years before COVID, we never missed having a minyan on Shabbat or the major chagim. Being a core part of our laning team, needing to practice reading Torah every week, changed my Jewish life, as the sounds of Torah were in our home almost every day. And as I prepared my verses, I found myself drawn into both the biblical Hebrew and the interpretive meaning of what I was laning, including the parsha of the week as a whole. By the time I was standing up on the bima on Shabbat morning in front of our little congregation, yad in hand, I felt not only physically and emotionally connected with the most sacred object in Judaism, but also with a tradition that had been practiced for something like 2,500 years. It was both a mystical and humbling experience for me, one that taught me both the power and the peace of being entirely present for the sacred task at hand in service of our aspiring community. Learning to gabai thoughtfully and sensitively was also a life lesson that nurtured my rabbinic identity and dreams. While, of course, there is the mechanical exercise of ensuring the Torah is read accurately, a thoughtful gabai learns to have a sixth sense of whether the laner who has made an error is able to get themselves back on track, and whether correcting will do more harm than good. Toward the end of this time, I was gabaying for Marty, our Baal Koreh, and I could see and hear that he wasn't himself. And I understood that he was losing his vision and would soon have to give up this practice that he loved and he had spent 60 years of his life doing. I found myself weeping on the inside for him and understood that that Shabbat, that the opportunity and ability to lane wasn't a task to be taken for granted. It was a gift and an honor to be cherished. All of this laning experience created the foundation for my passion for the Hebrew language, modern, biblical, and prayer book Hebrew. And so literally my happy place in life became the 2.5 hours per week of one-on-one Hebrew study that I began soon after I started laning regularly. All of this radically improved my understanding of Torah, of the Tefillot, and was a way to actuate my love of Israel. In Dvarim, chapter 32, verses 10 to 13, Moshe instructs the people that once every 7 years, and I quote, to read this teaching aloud in the presence of all Israel. Gather the people, men, women, children, and the strangers in your communities, that they may hear and so learn to revere the Lord your God and to observe faithfully every word of this teaching. When I lane, I feel connected back to these beautiful, positive, inclusive, egalitarian verses of the Torah. No matter how much a lot of the interpretive commentary has narrowed some of the inclusiveness of the pshat of the verses, I sense that I'm doing something sacred in fulfilling this mitzvah. But when we lane, why do we sing? Why do we cantillate? According to Joshua Jacobson in his 800-page magnum opus, Chanting the Hebrew Bible, The Art of Cantillation, there are a number of reasons that we chant scripture. There are quite a few, so put on your seatbelts. The rabbi said first it was halakhically required. In the Bavli, Megillat 32a, with the possible reason being to distinguish reading the Torah from the Roman oratory tradition. Second, because of the Jewish tradition to beautify sacred acts, like the artistic building of the Mishkan. The talent of singing is also an artistic gift from God. So the Rambam said in the Mishnah Torah that the prayer should be led, quote, by a person with a sweet voice. Another one is that music is a means of communicating with God. In many Jewish prayers and sources, both the angels and the planets are literally singing to God. Notably, in a holy melody, when the angels convene in their Kedusha that precedes the Shema. Another one is that cantillation is somewhat like an opera score. It serves to dramatize the text. And cantillation also aided in the memorization of the text, which was essential for Torah reading in the exilic Jewish world. Chanting also distinguishes sacred from secular texts. And singing, rather than just speaking, enables amplification so that more people can hear. Finally, different tropes signal different emotions about the texts. For example, the trope for reading Megillat Esther on Purim versus the trope for reading Megillat Echa on Tisha B'Av. Totally different emotions in those tropes. A critical event in the popularization of laning was the creation of the Masoretic text toward the end of the 9th century by the rabbis of the Ben Asher Academy in Tiberias. By the way, Mati Friedman's The Aleppo Codex is an amazing true story of how the original text was ultimately saved from Syria and now resides at the Shrine of the Book at the Israel Museum. The Masoretic text provided the vowels, the punctuation, the melody to which the words are to be sung, and the syllable of the word where the emphasis is to be placed. All of the symbols enabled the reader not just to read the words, but to use inflection in chanting, thus enabling a story to be told. There are 6 different cantillation melodies in the Ashkenazic tradition. Torah, for Haftorah, for the high holidays Torah reading, for Megillat Esther, happy and joyful, for Megillat Echa, mournful, and then for the other Megillot, Ruth on Shavuot, the Song of Songs on Pesach, and Ecclesiastes on Sukkot. And there's another categorization to be aware of, which is that the melodies and the rhythm of the Sephardic and Mizrahi traditions are very distinct from the Ashkenazic. As Jacobson writes on page 1 of his tome, and really the message that I'd most like to leave with you before I actually cantillate a little bit, quote, cantillation is storytelling, and its most skilled practitioners are great storytellers. Of course, it's not just any story that they are telling. It's one of the oldest and most widely read stories on the planet. Cantillation at its essence is a means of putting across that sacred story with convincing rhetorical expression and vocal beauty. I had a lot of choices, but I might choose to cantillate and lane. But I chose what I laned on Shavuot, which is Yitro verses 19, verses 1 through 6, I believe. B'chodesh hashlishi l'tzeit b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim b'yom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai v'yisu merfidim v'yavo midbar Sinai v'yachanu b'midbar v'yichan sham Yisrael neged hahar Umoshe Allah El Elohim Vayikra Elav Adonai Min Hahar Lemor Ko Tomar Levet Yaakov V'taged Livnei Yisrael Atem Re'item Asher Asiti L'Mitzrayim Ve'esa Etchem Al Kanfei Nisharim Va'avi etchem elai ve'ata im shamoa tishmu'u bekoli ushmartem et briti v'hitem li segula mikol ha'amim ki li kol ha'aretz ve'atem tili Mamlechet Kohanim ve'goy kadosh ele hadvarim asher tidaber el b'nei Yisrael. Thank you for listening. I love this part of Torah, and as I was sharing in my comments, when I practice, I sometimes become really aware of the beauty of the language And these verses, of course, are such famous verses. That language, Al Kanfei Yesharim, it's to me just mystical and something holy that some human being thought of those words and expressed that idea in such a beautiful way. So, those are my thoughts that I'd like to share tonight about cantillation, the history of cantillation, and appreciate you all listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. That was amazing. And it was an amazing segue into my piece, my little part this evening. I'll be covering Jewish spiritual music during the 17th and 18th century in Eastern Europe, particularly nigunim. A nigun is a Jewish spiritual melody or a chant that is usually sung without words or a repeating phrase. Nigunim are used to rouse emotional expression before prayer or great spiritual meditation or even a fabrang. The meaning of the word nigun, nun gimel nun, is from the root of the Hebrew word meaning play or make a musical melody. Nigunim are sung to achieve spiritual states, devikut, or attachment, connecting, or clinging to God. Simcha, joy, doing tefillah, prayer, and histapachut hanefesh, the outpouring of the soul. Nigunim are deeply connected with Hasidic or the Hasidic movement that developed during the 17th and 18th centuries in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Ukraine, Hungary, and the like. The Baal Shem Tov, who lived from 1700 to 1760, who was the founder of the great Hasidic movement, taught that every Yid, every Jew was capable of developing a hishkarut, a deep spiritual connection to God, regardless of their level of education or knowledge and information of Jewish sources. Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Lodi, who lived from 1745 to 1812, the founder of Chabad Hasidus, utilized the formation of nigunim as a door, if you will, or an entry way to prepare the mind to intellectually open to receive deep spiritual concepts and ideas. I want to play very briefly, probably about maybe less than a minute, a part one and a part two of a nigun that capsulates this idea of using a nigun to draw you in and to prepare your mind to be to spiritually receive whatever the teaching was or whatever the fabrang of the evening was. So I'll share my screen here. All right, so I will play this one first. This gives a brief explanation of the nigun that we will listen to after.
This nigun was quite beloved by the Rebbe Rashab. He would sing it on Shabbos and Yontiv and all festive occasions during the period after he had left Lubavitch and relocated to Rostov in the First World War in the year 5676 Tov Reish Ayin Vav, which is 1916. For this reason, it is also called the Rostovan nigun. This nigun brings one to take stock of his soul and arouses longings for godliness. This nigun was also sung before the Rebbe would recite a Maimer Chassidus, and for this reason it is also known as the Maimer nigun.
Nigunim were often borrowed from other traditions. Even outside, secular music was believed to have sparks of Kedusha, of holiness. The Hasidic leaders would reformat and even adopt these melodies. This was a very big inyan of Chabad Hasidus, the elevation of everything from mundane to a holy use. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, who lived from 1772 to 1810, the founder of the great Breslov Hasidic movement, was the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, Rabbi Nachman followed the spiritual tradition of the great Hasidic masters, focusing his Torah on emuna, personal prayer, or hibodidut. I'll now play one of my very favorite nigun, the personal favorite nigun of Rebbe Nachman. And keep in mind, Rebbe Nachman was more of a uh, contemporary, if you will, because he lived within the last 200 years. So he is closer, to us than some of the great Hasidim like Rebbe Zur, Rebbe Shneur Zalman of Ladi of blessed memory, and other Rebbeim. So this is my personal favorite nigun. I have two versions of this nigun. One is actually one that is accompaniment with music, but there's one that is a little bit a rawer version of a nigun, and this one really, really touches me. So I'll play just a little bit of this now. This is a particular favorite niggin of mine because as you can listen to the tempo at how the niggin starts and how it begins to work itself up, it is, it shows how it allows the individual who is listening to the Fabring or about to pray, or about to study, to really connect his soul, if you will, with the soul of the Rebbe or whoever is about to bring the message. So this is a really favorite niggin of mine. I'll just play a couple minutes of this other niggin, the one that is a little composed to music, just real quick here. And notice the same. This is one of the favorite Nigunim of Rabbi Nachman, and all of his Talmidim sing this Niggun. This particular niggin was composed or recomposed by Shlomo Katz. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with Shlomo Katz. Rabbi Nachman believed deeply in music as a way to heal the human soul, and to raise one from Yeyush, or despair. Rabbi Nachman, during the period of the 17th and 18th century, nigunim were also used as a segula, or a remedy for spiritual healing and protection. It's important to note that every Hasidic community developed its own set of nigunim, from Chabad to Breslov to Karlin. There are a myriad of different nigunim, and the rebbes of these particular groups often had their very own melodies to which their students would memorize the Rebbe's nigun. After the Rebbe's passing, these various groups would keep the memories and the works of their Rebbe's alive by singing his favorite nigun. Nigunim were also used to communicate a message or as a silent protest when public teaching or prayer was prohibited. These melodious wordless songs allowed a community to communicate with each other and to connect to their tradition without rousing the suspicion of the governing authorities. Nigunim were also used to communicate a message or a silent protest. When public teaching or prayer was prohibited, these melodious wordless songs allowed communities to communicate with each other, their tradition without rousing the suspicion of governing authorities. Karlin Stalin dynasty of a Hasidic dynasty was founded by Rabbi Aaron of Karlin, was known for a very loud and intense nigunim. There were particular nigun that Karlin Hasidim would sing publicly called Ka Eshkof. And the melody or the piyut or was from the prayer, "O Lord, I yearn for you." In Poland and Lithuania, public prayer was outlawed, right? And the Hasidim would gather and sing Ka Echov, "Lord, I yearn for you," with such intensity that it completely replaced the words of the Amidah, right? Hasidim would gather quietly and sing this nigun, allowing it to stand in the place of the words of the Amidah that could not be recited publicly. During this period, there were many underground synagogues and stables in Poland, Ukraine, and all over Lithuania, where nigunim replaced prayer from a siddur proper or even memorize words because you couldn't even speak the words from the siddur, as all of the books had been confiscated, and speaking Hebrew or Yiddish aloud was outlawed. Here is an example as I conclude from the tradition of Karlin Hasidim. And if you notice the up-tempo beat and sound of the klezmer music, which we will hear more about in tonight's presentation, incorporated into this nigun. Thank you so much.
That was beautiful, Lior. And we've just come out of this Nigunim and the wordless melodies that come from deep within the soul with my colleague Lior. I get to teach about klezmer this week, a kind of music that I have loved since before I first heard Gazmir, our Shar Zahab pickup klezmer band. Let us pick up this thread of music and trace how our Jewish music evolved, how it carried our people, and how it still carries us. Throughout this part of the drash, we're going to listen to 7 klezmer songs or tunes with our ears and our bodies. And don't be afraid to move with the music however you like. Let's rewind to the 19th century, to the Jewish communities of Eastern Europe. Picture it: Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, tight-knit Jewish villages where life was hard, but music was rich. Out of these communities came the klezmorim, traveling Jewish musicians who played for weddings and holidays and simchas. Klezmer music was the soundtrack of the Jewish street. Played on clarinets, violins, and it mixed Jewish liturgical modes with Romanian dance rhythms, Ukrainian folk tunes, even Turkish and Roma influences. Fregish is one of those musical modes that evokes a distinctly Jewish sound. You hear it immediately and think of klezmer clarinet crying and the violin singing under the huppah. It often is called the Jewish scale because it's so tied to Ashkenazic musical tradition, especially in klezmer. Musically, it's a twist on the Phrygian mode. Technically, it's what they call Phrygian dominant, but you don't need to know the theory to feel it. Fregish embodies a deep soulful tension between sorrow and celebration that runs through much of our Jewish music. Now, this is our first song we're going to listen to. It's Doina, a Romanian piece by the Klezmorim. Now, that track opened with an improvisational lament, a traditional form that lets klezmer musicians speak their soul before the dancing began. It was music with a Yiddish accent, laughing and crying at the same time. You could dance to it, you could weep to it. Klezmer was never just background music. It told the stories that we couldn't say out loud, the longing for home, the joy of a wedding beneath the chuppah, the pain of exile, and the stubborn celebration of life, even in the shadow of pogroms. When our people immigrated to the United States in the turn of the 20th century, they brought klezmer with them in their suitcases, along with their siddurim and their samovars. In New York, klezmer met jazz. In Chicago, it collided with blues. It became American, and then it almost disappeared. Our second piece is Yidel Mitten Fiddle, by the Abe Elstein Orchestra from 1936, from the film Yidel Mitten Fiddle. And we're going to listen to this.
Über Felder Wegen, auf verwogen Hay, mit Sinnen, Wind und Regen, fuhren Klezmer zwei. Achidisch, oi Achidisch, zog wir sind in See. Jidel mitten Fiedel, Ali mitten Bass, das Leben ist a Liedl, der Wusch seinen Kass. Hey, Jidel, Fiedel, Schmiedel, das Leben ist a Spaß. Oh, Jidel mitten Fiedel, Ali mitten Bass, das Leben ist a Liedl, der Wusch seinen.
This song reflects klezmer's fusion with American popular music and Yiddish theater. Notice the swing rhythm and the smoother orchestration. The Talmud teaches in Archin 11a that the Levites played music in the temple. Music wasn't just an accessory to holiness. It was a form of holiness, a way to lift up the spirit when words fell short. By mid-century, many American Jews were assimilating, and the children of grandchildren of immigrants were listening to Sinatra and then to the Beatles, and klezmer was at risk of becoming a relic. Our third song is Friend de Mechatonim Chem. It's composed by Naftali Brandwein and played here by Yitzhak Perlman. And we're going to listen to it. Two different instruments.
Fearing the Machatunim, take one.
4, the Stifty's Frelux, another piece by Naftali Brandwein, and we'll show the difference between the two. Now, Brandwein was a clarinetist whose fast-paced frelics reflected the energy of Jewish immigrant life in New York's Lower East Side. And then something remarkable happened. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the klezmer revival swept through across North America. Musicians like Andy Statman, the Klezmatics, and Alicia Spiegels began digging into the archives, breathing new life into these old melodies, fusing them with jazz and punk and world music. And klezmer wasn't static; it was alive. It was an evolving music form, just like our people. And our fifth piece of music is Old Klezmer by David Grisman and Andy Statman. So Statman fuses klezmer with bluegrass and jazz, creating something deeply Jewish and also thoroughly American. And then we have pieces like the hybrid klezmer of Man in a Hat by the Klezmatics.
A little sing ich jetzt für euch, wuss es mich heie. Die Melodies sind alte, noch die Wörter sind neue. Das gesungen haben unsere Sedes und euch Babes. Und der Tate vielleicht gesungen noch ein Titel Schabes. Sailor man, don't tell me of the 7 seas of yore. Java and Sumatra do not move me anymore. Say farewell to Finland, further inland than Old Thor. Adios Antilles and so long to Singapore. Having fun in London is like lying on the floor. I love man, I'll manage to avoid like Manticore. Budapest, I get no rest, and Boston is a bore. A man unique to my mystique in New York I adore. I met a man in a hat with a 10, met a man in a hat with a 10 hat, and I met a man in a hat. Chile is so silly that to be there is a chore.
So Man in a Hat is a soulful jazz-infused klezmer track that blends Eastern European musical fruits with contemporary, almost theatrical flair, and evokes like both the mystery and melancholy of the old world nostalgia, wrapped in the sharp clarinet runs and rich vocal storytelling. It's beautiful. And today, we live in a world where Jewish music is more diverse than ever. We've got queer Naganim circles, we have Mizrahi electropop, we have Hasidic hip hop, we've got Ladino lullabies, and yes, a complete klezmer punk trans revolution. This brings us to our 7th piece, FTM at the DMV.
You've got no PS in a curl, but your driver's license says you're a girl. You got black slacks and a small round hat. You feel like Yentl, what's that? It's Pat. Everyone says you're what you're not. You didn't even drive here because it's Shabbat. You love a person much you want to Uber, but you're stuck in line reading Martin Buber. FTM, DMV, you're FTM, DMV, FTM, the DMV, and you're considering what's Jew. The girls in line treat you like a pariah. You're raising a man shouting out with some slang. The workers are laughing at your legal name. You're full of pastrami and societal shame. Everyone says you're what you're not. You didn't even drive here because it's Shabbat. You love your cars so much you want to Uber, but you're stuck in line reading Martin Buber.
So FTM of the DMV is a sharp satirical punk anthem by the queer Yiddish punk band Schmeckel, whose name is itself a brazen reclamation of the Yiddish word for little penis. The song captures a bureaucratic absurdity and a deeply personal frustration of navigating gender transition in government systems at the DMV as the trans masculine person. Here's a band of trans Jews playing queer Yiddish punk, loud, irreverent, and deeply rooted in a shared history. What ties it all together? From the fiddler in the 19th century shtetl to transmasculine punks on Schmeckel is the belief that Jewish song matters, that it holds us, that it speaks where words fail. We make music because our ancestors did. We make music because we're still here. We make music because, as the psalmist says, Shir Ladonai, Shir Chadash, sing to the eternal a new song. And every generation does just that. At the same time, another musical transformation is beginning to happen, one that would shape how Jews prayed, not just how we partied. And her name was Debbie Friedman. More on her from my colleague, Marshall Weinstein.
Thank you. I have to just start with my own little intro that all three of the segments of your pieces, classmates, Chevra, I cantillate for a living. I sing Nuganim at the beginning of almost every service. And klezmer, well, I've not done a lot of klezmer or listened to a lot of klezmer. I'm going to segue now into the modern, but I am going to step it back a little bit. So, everybody can hear me? I'm good? So, my section is on contemporary Jewish music. And as waves of immigration influenced America, the character of Jewish life began to change, ebb, and flow. And as we've learned for the last 40 minutes or so, music has always been a significant part of Jewish worship and the communal experience. And as the Reform movement grew, primarily composed of German Jews who immigrated to America, they looked for music that sounded more American. They looked for music that was not traditionally Jewish. And as music developed, it absorbed influences from jazz, folk, rock, pop, and other emerging forms of contemporary music. Now, in the early part of the 20th century, contemporary Jewish music, aside from the klezmer, was typically very formal and classical in its sound. Lazar Wiener, who was the music director at Central Synagogue in New York City for more than 40 years, along with Rabbi Jonah B. Wise, influenced a change in culture that sought to make music a significant part of the service, at times replacing the sermon. Now, as the 70s went on, the Reform movement, much of which has been classically musically focused, started to show the influence of younger Jews, and congregationally focused modes of worship began to emerge. The young people wanted music that reflected their tastes and expressiveness. As cantors like the classically trained Raymond Smulliver began to create work, such as his folk rock service in 1968, and was accompanied by a book called The Gates of Freedom, things really started to change. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s. My first introduction to contemporary Jewish music was the Debbie Friedman genre that Marcia mentioned, in addition to the many pioneer songs that had become popular in the more liberal movements of Judaism. So we're going to share a couple. You're all muted, but you can move and sing your lips. So one of the first songs, like Bashana Haba'ah. Y'all remember this one? Bashana Haba'ah, Nesheva HaMirpesed, Mispor Siporim Yotedo, Eladim Nefusha, Nisagadu Tofeset Ben Habayit, Livein Hasado. That melody was written by a composer named Nurit Hirsch, who I always thought was a man until I learned she was not. And then we go into another one of her melodies, and everybody knows this one. Ose Shalom Rema, Uyase Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'imru Amen. And I sing that maybe every other week. These were staples in my Reconstructionist synagogue that I grew up with. Debbie Friedman, who was just coming into popularity, I didn't really know who she was, or specifically what songs she wrote. I only went to Jewish summer camp one summer. And though I didn't really know who the composers were, I did sing the following song. See if you recognize this one. Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Ra Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam. Written by Jeff Klepper and Dan Freelander in 1974. Vishamru B'nai Israel HaShabbat Lasot Et HaShabbat L'Toret HaBoritolam. Written by Moshe Rothblum in 1970. And how about this one? Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Shachayanu v'kimanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. That was written by Svika Pick in 1973. So after high school, I kind of fell out of familiarity with any contemporary Jewish music outside of what I grew up with until I became an adult and started attending a Reform synagogue. At that point, I started to become exposed to dozens of different composers. Shlomo Carlebach was one of the most prolific composers in the 1960s through the 1980s, recording more than 27 albums. And many more composers have covered his songs and his melodies extensively. So you may know this one, Carlebach's Kiva Moed Salam. We'll start with Salam first. Combination has become a staple of recording artists. Rick Rex repertoire, so many other people have covered it. So, Ojavo Shalom Aleinu, Ojavo Shalom Aleinu, Ojavo Shalom Aleinu, Ve'Havula Salam Aleinu Ve'Yamo Haolam, Salam, Salam. We all know that one. And then it goes, Kiva Moed. He combined it and turned it into this like anthem that is sung in Jewish summer camps. So the next person that Martin mentioned, Debbie Friedman, she recorded more than 20 albums. And her melodies were the stuff of Jewish summer camp legend, because that's where she recorded wrote most of her early songs. Her Mishaberach is probably one of the most famous. Mishaberach Avotenu. We all know that one. And then what about this one? And the women dancing with their timbrels followed Miriam as she sang her song. I think every Passover Seder either has that song in it or should. I sing it every year. But here's another one. Ose Shalom Bimromah Uyase Shalom Aleinu Be'alko Yisrael Be'imeru Amen. And her last one I want to do, Lechilah, to a land that I will show you. Lechacha, to a place you do not know. Raise your hand if you sing Lechilah every time you do Parshat Lech Lecha. Every time. Every single time. Now, Craig Taubman, who I've had the pleasure of singing with twice, he started recording in the 1980s, and he also has around 20 albums. And his famous melodies include this one, and I sometimes sing this after Torah service. Y'all recognize that one? But here's another one that we will hear different melodies for, his Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom V'Hamidenu Shomrei V'Chayim. And then, of course, there's this one. Lecha lecha Dodi, Lecha lecha Tala, B'nei B'nei Shabbat, Lecha B'la. Lecha lecha Dodi, Lecha lecha Tala, B'nei B'nei Shabbat, Lecha B'la da 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 da. And that's the end of my guitar playing for the night. But one of my other favorite melodies is he wrote a setting of Yedid Nefesh. It's absolutely beautiful. I got to sing it in duet with him twice. It makes my heart go all aflutter. So, the list of contemporary artists since these pioneers of music has truly developed the Jewish music scene, and it has exploded. I'm going to share with you some videos, some examples. There are too many people. I would sit here for 2 hours. There's too many people to share with you, but I do want to share some differing examples of the same liturgical song. So let me get started. The screen share will stop. Other participants, okay. Sorry, it just had a, okay. All right. So our first, this is a setting of Oseh Shalom by Rick Recht. And please, someone raise your hand if you can't hear it.
Amen. Oseh Shalom bimroma, v'ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yinu. Oseh Shalom, Oseh Shalom bimroma, v'ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yinu.
The next one, and I'm going to apologize if the ads come on. We'll click past them as soon as we can. This is Oseh Shalom by Alana Jagoda.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, hu ya'aseh shalom, hu ya'aseh shalom.
All right.
Be the one who makes peace, bring peace down, or bring peace down. Be the one who makes peace, bring peace down, or bring peace down. Be the one who makes peace, bring peace down, or bring peace down. Be the one who makes peace, bring peace down, or bring peace down.
And the last one, this is my friend Joe Buchanan. I'm going to share this. Joe is a Jewish Americana artist. He lives in Houston, Texas. And yes, he does lead services in his cowboy hat. So
It's all right. Yeah, Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei.
okay. The next set of songs I'm going to play is ones of Hashkivenu. Now, I'm using Joe again because Joe happens to be not only a dear friend, but he is one of my favorite Jewish artists. And here's his setting of Hashkivenu.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Leah Shalom V'Hamidenu Shomeinu L'chaim. Lay us down, Lord, lay us down, oh down.
One of the things that's interesting is that a lot of the contemporary artists have added English lyrics in with the Hebrew. Debbie Friedman did it. She probably started it. And it's really interesting. This melody of Hashkivenu, this is what I sing every Friday night.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. If I could follow you and know all of your ways,
wisdom. Oh, you'd keep me safe, and I'd always praise your name.
There's lots of liturgical music and prayers that have been set to music. During COVID, composer named Gabriel Mann and Piper Ruttman created this setting of Ahavat Olam that went completely and totally viral. After the Platt brothers do it, Ben Platt starred in Dear Evan Hansen, everybody knows who he is. And all three, he and his two brothers all have beautiful voices. Soon as this came out, people started recording it and making videos all over the world. You can type in Gabe Mann Ahavat Olam and you'll find multiple videos, but this is just a little bit of what they did with this prayer.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta.
All right. I'm going to stop the share for a minute. But from Rick Recht to Josh Nelson, to Josh Warshawski and Joe Buchanan, there's hundreds of artists creating thousands of pieces of music that are shared not just in synagogues, but in schools and in camps and in workshops and in conventions all over the world. They tour. They create music for children, for teens and adults, and they help to reinforce the joy in Judaism that ties our young people into our culture in similar ways that music has always done. So I'm going to encourage you to visit JewishRockRadio.com and listen to the myriad ways that Jews have transformed Jewish music. I can send you lists of artists to review. You can find the ones that fill your own soul. And I encourage you, if you have the skill, try to write your own melodies to prayers that speak to you. Filling the world with music is how we keep Judaism alive and keep our souls full. So I'm going to share one more video. All right.
Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu, hands in the air, get 'em up, Salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam, Salam, Salam, Salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam, Salam, Salam. Oh, Yavo, Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu ve'akol. Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu, Shalom Aleinu ve'akula. Put your hands together. 2, 3, 4, 1.
I've had the pleasure of working with Rick several times, studying with him several times. And you see how he takes this Shlomo Carlebach melody and just gives it to these kids and brings them into this space where they're excited to be Jewish, they're proud to be Jewish, and it envelops them and it creates an environment of joy and love and community. So we're able to bring Jewish music to life. We are able to have it speak to us, not only in the words of the liturgy or the text, but in the feelings and emotions that the melodies and the rhythm and the sound creates. So thank you very much for listening to our drash. I want to, on the behalf of Donald Neltzer, Lior Avraham, and Martin Rawlings-Fine, and myself, Marsha Weinstein, I want to say thank you very much for listening and enjoying. And if you are inspired, give us your feedback and let us know if we can give you any more information. Thank you so much. Toda Rabbi.